They tell you to be afraid of what's in the dark. But what if the true horror isn't the darkness itself, but what it reveals? The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and damp earth, like the moment before a storm that never breaks. His breath hitched as he noticed the pavement wasn't just cracked. It was breathing. A sticky residue coated his fingers where he'd touched the ground, smelling faintly of iron and something sweetly rotten. From somewhere beneath the street came a sound like wet fabric tearing, followed by a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Paralyzed by the unknown, he realized the ground wasn't just beneath him, it was watching him. And in that moment of primal dread, he understood why they never found the bodies. They're wrong. You should be afraid of what casts the dark. The flashlight beam swings up, illuminating the wall beside them. A long, distorted shadow is caught there, etched against the grimy surface. But the shadow's twisted posture doesn't match their own frozen form. The figure shifted unnaturally, its limbs elongating, its head pivoting deliberately toward them. Then, the screen plunged into absolute darkness. A stark, white title card materialized, the text creeping slowly into view. The town where every shadow has a different owner. The scene jarringly cuts to a bright, cheerful morning, the world now drenched in a sunny, nostalgic filter. We find Sarah and Mike loading their dusty SUV outside their Austin apartment, the Texas sun already baking the asphalt. Sarah smiles, hefting a heavy camera bag into the trunk, her voice laced with genuine relief. She speaks of 2 weeks in a quiet, picturesque Ohio town, a sanctuary from deadlines and city noise, promising nothing but peace. Mike teases her, picturing the countless photos of old barns and fog-draped fields destined for her atmospheric Americana series. Sarah's voice dropped to a conspiratorial hush. Moorhaven, she confirmed, was perfect. A population of just 1,200 souls it was famous for. Well, nothing at all. It was a place defined by its quiet. A quiet so profound it felt like a held breath. Just a quiet, forgotten dot on the map. Waiting. They rolled through rolling hills bathed in golden light, arriving in the picturesque village of Moorhaven. The postcard-perfect scene should have been welcoming, but an unsettling stillness permeated the air. There was no birdsong, no distant chatter, only the faint scent of damp earth and something metallic. Every instinct screamed that this beautiful facade concealed something profoundly wrong. The light cut like a blade, casting shadows that felt unnaturally deep and consuming. The locals, like John the storekeeper, offered polite nods, but their gazes slid away from Sarah's camera, their movements measured and deliberate. Later, as she set up her tripod, Sarah noted the eerie precision in every townsfolk's stride. Each footfall landed with a strange, calculated weight, as if they were navigating an invisible grid only they could see. Mike glanced at his phone, its screen flickering weakly. "Probably just bored," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "My cell service is already garbage here. It's like this town devours signals," he added, the words hanging in the heavy air. Later, in their rented cottage, Sarah reviewed the day's photos on her laptop. The screen cast an eerie blue pallor across her focused face. Each click through the images was accompanied only by the faint hum of the device and the distant creak of settling timbers. She freezes, her breath catching in her throat. Through the viewfinder, John stands outside his store, the late afternoon sun stretching a long shadow behind him. But the shadow's hat tilts at a different, impossible angle than the cap on John's actual head. The air suddenly feels thick and cold, as if the warmth of the sun has been leached away. Her fingers tremble slightly as she zooms the lens in, the mechanical whir the only sound against the heavy quiet. John's shadow clutched something unseen, a detail Sarah couldn't unsee. She dismissed it as a trick of the light, yet the photo remained on her phone, a silent witness. Over the next days, an obsession took root, sharpening her senses to the shadows. Subtle wrongness. She saw a child's shadow skipping with a playful bounce, while the child itself trudged wearily, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. Her shadow clung to the wall for a full second after she vanished around the corner. Later, at the town's lone grocery, John delivered Moorhaven's single rule with unsettling casualness. His voice dropped to a near whisper, the air suddenly tasting of damp earth and iron. "Aim to be indoors by sundown," he murmured, not meeting our eyes. "Moorhaven's streets, they ain't safe after dark. Animals, you know." Later, Mike asked Sarah what kind of animals the man had meant, his voice low. Sarah didn't answer. Instead, her photography took a sharp turn. She began deliberately framing Shadow's long, distorted shapes that seemed to move just out of focus. Her professional portfolio was forgotten, replaced by this new, chilling obsession. The images were unnerving. Mike's concern deepened. "This has stopped being a project, Sarah. You haven't slept properly in days. Every sound makes you flinch." The stale air carried the faint scent of ozone and something metallic. Sarah swiveled her laptop toward him, her voice dropping to a strained whisper. "Look," she insisted, pointing at a photo. "This fence post's shadow is bent, but the post itself is perfectly straight. She clicked to another image, her finger trembling slightly. And here, the mailman. His shadow has an extra limb. The air in the room seemed to thicken, carrying the faint, metallic scent of ozone as she waited for his reaction. Mike's sigh was weary, his voice strained with digital fatigue. He confessed to seeing pixels where reality should be, the tired mind playing tricks. The air tasted stale, thick with the metallic tang of spent electronics. A faint ozone scent clung to everything. He proposed a day trip tomorrow, his words carrying a desperate urgency. "Get out of here," he insisted, the phrase hanging in the heavy atmosphere. A damp chill seeped through the walls, as if the room itself resisted departure. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of failing machinery. That evening, the threat turned personal. As Sarah brushed her teeth, the overhead bulb hummed, its stark light pinning her to the white tile. Then she saw it, her own shadow on the wall, but it moved a fraction of a second after she did. The air in the small room grew thick and stale, carrying the faint, metallic scent of old pipes and a deeper, colder dread. Sarah placed the toothbrush on the sink, but her shadow continued brushing for 2 more seconds before freezing. A metallic scent filled the air as her breath caught in her throat. Later that night, lying beside Mike, she whispered into the darkness, "It's not our shadows, Mike. We don't truly own them here. They're just loaned to us during the day. At night, they go back to their real owners." Mike, half asleep, mumbled, "That's a nightmare talking." The next afternoon, Sarah discovered the final clue. Half hidden among twisted roots at the town's forgotten edge lay a faded, hand-painted wooden sign. The air around it carried the faint metallic scent of old rain and decaying leaves. Its crude, peeling letters delivered a final, chilling command. "Do not block the light." Beneath the words, "Respect the divided dark." A date, 1888. Later, a pamphlet from the Historical Society would reveal that was the year a catastrophic fire consumed the original Moorhaven, a mining town. The inferno sealed the fate of dozens of men, trapping them in an abyss of absolute, suffocating blackness. Spooked by Sarah's escalating panic and the town's oppressive, watchful stillness, Mike finally insists they leave. As a bloody orange sun gashes the horizon, they throw their bags into the vehicle, Mike vowing they'll reach the next town by dinner. This was a mistake. As Sarah ran back into the cottage for her laptop, the sun dipped below the tree line. Dusk fell not slowly, but like a switch being flipped. The streetlamps of Moorhaven remained dark. Sarah watched from the window as Mike waited by the car, tapping his phone. His shadow pooled at his feet in the SUV's interior light. It wasn't still. It writhed, like a pit of snakes. Then, impossibly, it stood up. It peels itself off the asphalt, a two-dimensional silhouette of Mike, but jet black and long-ledged, predatory. Mike senses movement, a subtle shift in the air, and turns. The shadow thing lunges, a silent blur of darkness. It passes through him, leaving a cold, ozone-tinged emptiness in its wake. Mike clutched his chest, a ragged gasp escaping his lips before he crumpled to the floor. Sarah's scream tore through the room, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. She burst through the door, only to find the familiar street transformed into a yawning chasm of absolute blackness. Then, movement. From every wall, every porch, every alley, the darkness itself began to peel away and take form. The townspeople's own shadows had become their daytime pursuers. Animated, ravenous, and unbound. Devoid of features, they were only shifting silhouettes that moved with a silent, insectile rustle. The real townsfolk were nowhere to be seen, safely barricaded indoors behind the glow of their lamps. They had returned their daily burdens, and now something else carried the weight of the coming night. He's unconscious but breathing. Her own shadow, cast by the cottage light, stretches ahead of her. She watches in horror as the shadow slowly turns its head toward her. A long, accusing finger extends from the darkness, pointing down the road leading out of town. This wasn't guidance. It was an accusation hanging in the damp night air. The shadow herd converged, flowing across the ground like spilled ink. A chorus of whispers invaded her mind, not through her ears, but through the marrow-deep chill in her bones. The words coiled around her thoughts. Stay, be still, become part of the divided dark. Her fingers fumbled for her camera. It screened a sudden, shocking flare of light in the consuming blackness. She flicks on the blinding LED photo light, sweeping it across the advancing shadow. They hiss silently, recoiling and tearing apart like black smoke in the beam. But for every shadow she disperses, 2 more seep from the surrounding darkness, accompanied by a faint scent of ozone and rot. Her battery icon blinks red, and with a surge of primal dread, she drags Mike toward the car. Her shadow, tethered by the camera's harsh light, fought her every step, a black anchor of pure negation. The key fob clicked uselessly in her trembling hand, its tiny LED light dead. The car was a silent, dark hulk, its interior a void that seemed to swallow the faint light. The warm glow from the cottage window was a taunting, impossible distance away, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. Her camera light flickered and died, plunging her into absolute darkness. In that void, cold, formless hands brushed against her skin. Her scream tore through the silence just as a floodlight erupted from beside the general store. John stood there, holding an industrial lantern, his gravelly voice cutting through the air. To the store, the shadows seemed to flinch and scuttle back, dissolving into the greater dark that waited just beyond the circle of light. Now, don't step out of the light. A sharp gasp escapes Sarah as she yanks Mike back into the fragile halo. John remains motionless, his silhouette stark against the oppressive gloom. The air grows thick with the scent of wet stone and a faint, metallic tang. John clutched the lantern, his jaw tight with grim resolve. They stumbled the short distance to the store, John walking backwards, keeping the light trained on the devouring darkness. He slammed and bolted the door, the heavy thud echoing in the sudden stillness. Inside, the store was now illuminated by a dozen lanterns and flickering candles, their light dancing across the walls. Safe, for now. Sarah, what are they? What do they want? John, the miners, those who perished in the absolute blackness of the shafts, never received proper rights. They were consigned to an eternity without light, without peace. So they began to stir in that deep earth. And now, they are coming back to take the light they were denied. Each dawn, they claim a fragment of our essence. We endure their spectral presence under the sun, constant, oppressive weight. And when night falls, they wander freely within the darkness we cast. This grim exchange is our sole covenant for survival. Sarah's voice trembled with urgency as she pleaded, "We have to leave!" John finally met her gaze, his expression heavy with pity. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old copper. "And go where?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant scratching of branches against the cabin walls. "Your shadows have tasted this place. They're linked now. You take a piece of them with you, and they'll want it back." Dawn arrives not with light, but with the retreat of an unnatural blackness. It melts away, leaving behind only the ordinary shadows of morning. The air holds the faint, coppery scent of ozone, a lingering echo of the vanished dark. Mike stirred, consciousness returning through a haze of weakness and fractured memory. Outside, the townspeople emerged, moving with mechanical precision through the picturesque streets. The scene was postcard-perfect, yet the air carried the faint, metallic tang of ozone and something older, more organic. Sarah and Mike's SUV sat repaired in the driveway, its dark windows reflecting nothing but the empty street. They drove from Moorhaven in heavy silence, Sarah's face drawn and vacant. As they crossed the town limit, her eyes drifted to the side mirror. For a fleeting instant, the retreating town vanished. A congregation of gaunt, elongated silhouettes stood at the boundary, motionless witnesses to their escape. She blinks, and they're gone. That night, in a motel 50 miles away, Sarah rises from bed for water. A single nightlight casts her elongated shadow across the peeling wallpaper. Too drained to notice, she moves through the heavy, stale air. Sarah raised the glass to her lips, taking a measured sip of water. On the wall, her shadow continued drinking, its throat working in a silent, greedy swallow long after she had stopped. She froze, refusing to turn, tears welling as a primal dread took hold. In the dark window's reflection, her own shadow slowly, deliberately smiled back at her. The figure remained motionless, its silhouette stark against the flickering streetlight. A faint scent of ozone and damp earth clung to the air, thick and unnatural. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace that defied all logic, it began to turn. How closely did you watch your shadow today?